Welcome everybody to today's webinar. Happy that a lot of you already joined. We see there's quite a lot of people joining in the very moment, so we'd give them another couple of seconds to join. Thank you to everybody who's already here. I'm very happy that you made it through the webinar. I think we have prepared an awesome lot for you today in terms of the topic that you can already see here. While there are more and more people jumping in, maybe let me just introduce you to some organizational stuff on how to use GoToWebinar. So, well, as you've already seen, today we will be using GoToWebinar for everything in terms, of course, of visualization, but also to get interactive with you. So the idea would be to use, as you see in your panel, you can use chats, you can use questions. We will also have some polls in there. So there will also be the option to get interactive with you. And to try the questions, there's one thing that I just briefly ask you. It's also good for me. Can you hear me? Because then, first of all, I get confirmed that my audio is okay, and then you can already use the questions panel. So feel free to just quickly, for organizational reason, use that. And I already see there the first ones coming in. Perfect. Everything seems fine. Thank you. More people coming in and answers as well. Perfect. So, as I said, at any time, feel free to interrupt us with any questions. And enough of the organizational part. I'd like to start with the webinar now. Digitalization and with the enterprise finance process with low code, the success story of Merck, dox42, Nintex, and of course with our implementation partner, Bridging. Luckily for all the content that we have done or prepared for today, I'm not alone, but I'm also joined by 3 amazing people. So the whole process that you will see today will be part of 4 organizations with, as you see on the slide, 4 people. For this, we will have, first of all, we will have Merck, who is the company that did the project. Bridging IT was the implementation partner, so they helped them implement the whole product, the whole project. And in the whole project, there is 2 products involved, which is Nintex and dox42. First of all, for Merck, I'm very, very happy to be joined by Justyna Kapinska. She's the head of process management for closing and GL processes. Hello, Justyna.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Perfect. Cool. We also see a picture. Everything is fine here. Then Hermann, yours already works great. Hello, Hermann. Hermann is from our partner Bridging IT, and he's the head of the Competence Center for Process Digitization. Hello, Hermann.
Hello. Good morning, everybody.
Happy to have you on board for today. And of course, Cosima, also to you, a warm welcome from Vienna too. I think you're in London. So hi, Cosima.
Hi, and yes, I'm currently in London and I work for the company who did the process automation, and I'm really happy to be here. And I can't wait that I see actually as well, like you do, what has been done with our product with the customer and our partner.
Perfect. Thank you, Cosima. Yeah, and last but not least, my name is Johannes Linder. I am the lead technical evangelist at dox42. Our product is something that did the whole document automation part in today's project. We will see this in the live demo later on, but most importantly, those 2 that did that project, Hermann and Justyna, stage is all yours.
Thank you. Before we start, I would quickly like to say a few words about the 2 main actors in this. So one is Bridging IT. We are a full-service IT consultancy company that focuses on offering everything from end of innovation, starting with new ideas, to implementation, realizing solutions, and then afterwards maintaining it as well, providing managed services and similar things. And within Bridging IT, a company of in total about 600 people, we have a competence center for process digitization. We have been working a long time with different platforms, but a lot of our work is related to K2, and we focus there on advanced solutions. Working with Merck since 2015 already as a preferred supplier for such solutions, but also with some other companies like German Rail, Bosch, and some smaller companies. And we have focused a lot on really advanced things like the ones you will see today. And we have been awarded quite a few elements, both recognized by K2 as well as by Merck Finance, for really good projects. And Justina.
Yes, thank you, Herman. So when it comes to Merck, it's one of the oldest operating pharmaceutical and chemical companies in the world, founded in year 1668. Currently, we are counting with circa 58,000 of employees worldwide. We have around 400 companies belonging to the whole Merck concern, so Merck Group. And it's a company that registered in 2020 17 billion euro sales. Merck's ambition is to leverage science and technology to achieve as much as possible for human progress, and we have a big contribution in the or big results in research and development area. So also an example from 2020, we spent 2.3 billion euros on research and development. And our research scientists, they are working on groundbreaking technologies and medicines. Just to give you some examples, medicines to treat cancer or multiple sclerosis or infertility in our healthcare sector. Then we have research on antibodies and water purification systems in life science. And in our electronics sector, we are working on liquid crystal displays, effect pigments for coating and color cosmetics. What we did in the project with Bridging IT, we were looking at the finance process at Merck, which is around intercompany cross-charging. We used the name cross-charging to define invoicing of services and different kind of costs between Merck daughter companies. And we don't talk here about invoices for trade. We only talk about invoices for different miscellaneous costs and services. The challenge we are having is that, as I said, Merck has around 400 subsidiaries, and we are in the moment of time where we have many different underlying finance ERP systems. So as you can see on the slides, we are posting invoices into around 16 different systems. So in order to find the best process for company as Merck, we needed to look, okay, what kind of project, what kind of process we can design for worldwide for all Merck employees to be able to request for intercompany invoices and then to bring all on one platform, regardless of the fact that we have so many different ERP systems. You can also see some statistics on the right side. So until today, since the project was launched, we created more than 15,000 invoices, and you can see also how many line items we have in total. So how many different costs and services have been cross-charged, and also what kind of transaction volume we are talking about. Next slide, please. In our process value stream, we were facing different kind of issues which occurred at different stages. One of the biggest issues for us was that there was, due to the fact that Merck is such a big company and has so many employees and so many different business cases for charging, one of the bigger problem was that we couldn't that there was often lack of pre-alignment between the Merck daughter companies to discuss or to align about a new invoice. So very often there were invoices created or issued by one Merck subsidiary, and then it somehow was getting lost because there was no clear contact name for the receiving entity of such an invoice. We also had a lot of different manual request templates without any validation checks. Invoices were issued in Excel, in Word, sometimes in the local software, sometimes directly out of ERP system. So there was really lack of one standard. And due to complex tax regulations or the guidelines that we had at Merck, often the invoices were not complying to the rules properly, and then the biggest workload was always in the intercompany accounting team, who had to struggle with the manual process. When we were facing the end of the month and we had to have clean accounts or reconcile the accounts, there we were seeing a lot of differences, invoices that were not posted or were posted with delay. And then in the end, also for controlling reporting, for group accounting reporting, we had problems, differences to reconcile. And also we were in the spotlight for the auditors because of that fact.
Okay, this is basically the starting point when we started the project in 2020. And what we have, in a sense, as an idea is, and I take it a little bit back, you know, project management. And in project management, there's this magic triangle that you want to optimize costs, time, and quality at the same time. And it's a real challenge. We experience it in our practice, in our project, that there's something similar with process management. So processes are difficult to optimize at the same time, to make them efficient, to make them have a really great user experience, so that it's really easy to do for the users to use the process, and at the end to have compliance. So compliance often is counterproductive for user experience or for efficiency. And the really key challenge is to do everything at the same time. So to make all the dimensions better in one go. And this is what we set off in this project. So to make this better. And our approach in this is that we take a agile process digitization approach. So really working very closely together with business. We had a number of subject matter experts involved in this. Justina, of course, as the head of the processes herself, and a lot of experience in the process, but also from the teams like the service center in the Philippines and in Germany. And then to have three main elements in this. And the first one is really to think end to end. So to really go through the process and say, what can we do from the start to make it as easy as possible, but also to have compliance already in mind, to have reporting in mind, etc. And there's a lot of potential to really streamline the process and reduce the efforts by this end-to-end thinking. The second one is managing complexity. You've seen it. It's a hugely complex process. The process itself is not actually that complex in itself, but all the rules and all the special cases, they have to be managed, and you can be overwhelmed by the complexity. And the third one is really using the right platform for this, and using the platform to the full. I would like to go through it in a few more elements. So when we thought about end-to-end thinking, we really started with the submission of this. So one of the things is, if you get an intelligent form into it, you can guide the user, you can validate elements, you can structure information, and all this information then helps you run through the process. So one of the biggest things is really automating and supporting the user at the beginning as much as possible, but already thinking what is needed later. The second one is, in this case, we said we want to have this receiver involved, so they can comment on it, they can accept the charges or reject them as well. And at the same time, we said, well, we have this unique situation. If you have an external customer, he cannot change anything in terms of accounting. But for the internal customer, because we have it already, they can already think about, for example, how to split the costs into their own accounting systems. So it's one step. You don't have to do it later. It can be done directly at this point. We had also a human element in the IC account making a final check. It's quite complex elements, and it is important that we have a type of quality check to look at the things from an accounting perspective. But again, it's a lot of automation, a lot of support involved in this, so that this step is again as little effort as possible. And then we have the actual posting set, and there we have the automation, but for some systems we have such few volume that still the manual process makes more sense than automating it. And we wanted to have this both possible and be flexible to switch between the two options. And again, here we can track completion, we can track that everything is fine and inform all the stakeholders along the process. And using this, we at the same time get all the possibilities like transparency for all the people involved. So you can always look up what is the current status, is the review done, is it already posted, etc. And we get directly all the KPIs from the process. And lastly, we have compliance elements built in. For example, there's a special topic of intergroup agreements which have to be in place, and we can make sure that this is already all aligned and in place. I mentioned a few things of automation. For example, elements like we have tax assessments in here. We have topics of mass invoices. So we have cases where in one go 200 or 250 invoices have to be generated in one step. We have also repeating topics. Justina will come into some of these topics a little bit later. We have then the document generation and the posting information, which goes into the ERP, and finalizing it, as well as managing schedules. So along the way, there are certain deadlines which have to be met. And again, the system automates all these kind of things. And all this, again, leads to very consistent data and orchestration of all the activities. So people get reminders when something is happening, as well as we have some rules along this processing. The second part, it's really about complexity. And a lot of people think when you go to low code, is it possible to handle this? Don't we need an SAP system or something really very, very heavyweight in order to handle this? And of course, this is a real challenge. It's topic of effort, it's stability. So if you are having too much complexity, the solution is not stable. And of course, also things like what happens if things change, and you have to have maintenance and evolution in this. And typically what we see on the market is two approaches. One is it's the typical of no code or very simple solutions. You hard code a lot of things, or you try to hard code. But of course, this is not possible with all the complexity we have in this solution. The other approach which is often taken is to make it super flexible. So to make anything possible. And then again, you run into the complexity problem. And what we found is we have to understand the dimensions of the variance. So for example, tax rules have a certain way of how it's done, and you really have to understand it and model it in a way that it can be handled. And the same also with the processing elements, to say, okay, this step is taking this approach, this is having in this module, and then you are flexible in the terms of evolution, that you know, oh, I have to just touch this element in the solution, and then I'm fine to implement a certain requirement. And we call this right flexible, so it's just in the middle ground. Now it's get a little bit technical, but maybe bear with me this. So I would still say what is somehow magical behind such solution. We get a limited line item for entry from the user. So they just have to enter what is necessary to understand the minimum things, but this is not enough to really what gets into the ERP system as final result. So what we take is, for example, the legal entity, and from the legal entity we know on the one side the ERP system, and we have a processing module which has processing rules in there. And we use this. We have another one which has country relations, so we know which countries are involved and what is the relationship. And again, we can relate this with certain tax rules in the database. And out of this comes the total information. And what we call low code now is that this whole processing can be, by good modeling, by a good way of capturing it, we have here on the one side, it's about 120 lines of code to make all the processing of the ERP system, and the complete tax management, it's just 30 lines of SQL code. So this is what we call coding in here. There is code, there needs to be code because it's complex processing. But again, by doing it in a good way, intelligently, in the collaboration between data model, between the low-code systems and how they work, and this processing approach, we have actually very little code in the end. Another, I'm looking at the time, another thing I would like to mention here is the question about how do we connect between all the ERP systems. It's again an element of complexity. So we looked into having native API interfaces, for example, with SAP. And in a lot of projects, we do such native interfaces. However, the experience is it's really high effort, and it's a level of data quality one needs, which is not often productive. Why is this the case? When you have an SAP system, they have forms, and the forms also have some intelligence in, for example, the SAP system. And if we fill the forms using a bot, RPA bot, it's actually more productive. It's easier to implement this. And we have a human backup. So if the bot doesn't work, there's still the human who can read it and who can use it. And you see here, we generate automatically documents with dox42, like the invoice document and the posting document. And this is very, very little effort and gives us the flexibility. However, when I talk about RPA, there's often the case to say, RPA is actually the most important thing, and everybody jumps on RPA. I think this is like what is doc and what is tail. So the doc is actually the process and the process management we had before, and the RPA makes a nice addition to it, but you would never be able to run such process on an RPA basis. So it's really the background of the systems. And this is now the elements of the low-code approach. We have a number of low-code platform like K2 has different elements. We have integration with backend systems, with databases and so on. We have forms, we have the workflow, we have reporting on it. And this works a little bit like Lego bricks. So you build your solution by plugging together Lego bricks. And of course, there are solutions which have more the Duplo type Lego bricks. It's easy to put together, but you can do very little with it. And you have more the Lego Technic type platforms, and you can do a lot of powerful and interesting things. And K2 is certainly more the Lego Technic type platform than the Duplo platform. Also, one important thing, the two elements which are really important for this, it's integration and it's forms. Workflow is important as well, but usually when I look at our solution, it was in the end like 10% of the total implementation effort to do the workflow part. The other part were really the big things. And one thing I said, we have integration and the forms part. So how is it set up? We have in the background, we have a database. On the database, we have functional modules which work here. And this has to be really a very powerful database because there's lots of data in it, a lot of processing in it. And then we have this integration element which works with the database and feeds the forms and the workflow. And this is the setup which makes it very powerful to provide rules and to work with the system. Interesting, the dox42 has very much the same concept in it. So we have a data connection layer, which is can connect to a lot of different data sources and somehow brings the information into the system for easy processing inside the system. And then we have templates which are similar to the forms, where we can now build in this information, build in rules in such a powerful way that almost anything is possible and very quickly. So this was a little bit of an introduction to give you an overview of the solution. I would hand over to Justina to go actually into the system and show a little bit how it works.
Thank you, Herman. I hope you can now see my screen and you should be able to see the Picasso form. Can you confirm?
Yes, it's fine.
Excellent. Yeah, so let me take you, let me take you through the demo of the whole process. What you can see on the screen here is what the end user can see once they access Picasso tool. And the access point to Picasso tool is through our ticket system, the ticket system that existed already before. Therefore, the user have clear information. If they go to our formal ticket system, then if they want to request for a new intercompany invoice for services, they will be redirected to Picasso form directly, as you can see it here. So we have this one page form where we have different sections, and the user will have to enter mandatory information in the fields that are underlined in red. And so let me show you an example. Let's imagine we would like to request for a new invoice from one Merck entity to another Merck entity for project costs. I'm going to call it a project cost summer. And we can choose between invoice, credit note, or different kind of document type. On the, sorry, can you still see my screen?
It's fine.
Okay, because I don't know how to minimize the one thing, sorry. So on the right side, we can choose the document date. So let's choose the date from today, 16th of February. Then we are going to choose the issuing Merck entity and receiving Merck entity. So we can type the Merck entity name directly. Let's take one of our French subsidiaries, Merck Santé, as issuing entity of this invoice, and our mother company, Merck KGaA, as the receiving entity. For us, it was very important. You might remember what I said at the beginning, that in our old process, we were often lacking clear contact names because Merck is such a big organization. Now we make it mandatory for the requestor or the end user to enter a contact name from the receiving entity of the invoice. We always assume that the person who is requesting the new invoice is working at the issuing entity, in this case in Merck Santé. So we look for a user in our Merck directory. We can type directly the name of user or user ID, and then we just have to select the currency. And on the right side, something that Herman mentioned, we are asked to say if there is an intra-group agreement, so a contract underlying for this service. So the user has to choose one of the options. We can also select at this stage if we want to add a markup. So markup to be charged between Merck entities. Most commonly used for us, it's 5%. And here we come to the interesting point also mentioned by Herman. We can request a one-time invoice, or we can make it a repeating invoice with a frequency, for example, of 1 month. We decide if the amount is fixed or if it's changing every time. We decide what is the schedule, and for our repeating invoice, if we're charging current or past costs. So this is something we can have in case we want to have invoice automated every month and not to request it every time, single time. So this is the header information, what we just filled out. Just one thing missing, the period for the costs. The header information that we just filled out, we can proceed to the next step, which is adding line items of the invoice. And for this, we have two possibilities. We can either upload line items from an Excel template, which can be downloaded directly in Picasso tool by the end user, or we can just add the line items manually by clicking here on the plus button. And here it is much more, I might say, user-friendly because the user will see directly which information is needed and which is mandatory. So for every invoice, we can have one or more line items. And for each line item, we have to select a category, because based on the category which we will choose, Picasso will then do its magic and will use the underlying matching tables to determine accounting information based on our Merck accounting rules. So for this invoice, let's say it's a project costs for information services. I'm going to use category IS. And I'm going to say we have two line items. One is project cost summer part 1. We have to select a thing called SCB code. It is needed for German central bank reporting. We have a drop-down list built for that, so that the end user has an easier process. Then we would type the amount. Let's say we charge 10,000 euros. And then this is the remaining information needed for this one line item. So the user has to enter issuing entity information. So for the entity Merck Santé in France, we need from the user to give us the one of cost objects, which is needed later for accounting. And here we make one of the cost objects mandatory. Is it a cost center or internal order or WBS element? And the user also has to provide information for the receiving entity, Merck KGA. In this case, we don't make it mandatory, but we highly recommend to enter also one of the cost objects. If the end user doesn't provide a cost object at this stage, in the later stage of the workflow, it will be required by the receiving entity contact name. In this case, I named Ms. Sabine Behrens. She will need to enter cost object before the whole invoice is finalized. So what we want to achieve is that the whole workflow, until it's finished, we have all mandatory information provided so that the accounting team at the very end of the process doesn't have to chase for this information, send countless mails, clarify, and be stressed. And this was one of the main objectives of the workflow and of Picasso. So with this, I will save and close my first line item. Let's add one more line item on our invoice. Let's take a different category this time, consulting services. And for our project summer, we will charge part 2. Now it's a little bit cheaper. We're going to have only 5,000 euro. And we also need to select some mandatory information here.
And you just see in this, for this category, you have different fields to enter than for the previous category. So we have here for each category certain rules and presettings that are automatically drawn and comply to the requirements.
Exactly. Thank you, Herman. And this was one of the complexity aspects mentioned by Herman. We have so many rules at Merck, and for each entity, the rule apply differently in the sense that we have maybe different ERP system. So the name or the number of account is different, or mandatory fields are different. So based on categories and entities, which we are using here, we have different set of data to fill out. So now in our line items, we have 2 line items. In total, we have 15,000 of costs plus the markup calculated here automatically. And we can now add some attachments. We can add calculation screenshots. We can add intra-group agreement. We can add maybe some additional information to this request. And at the very end, the end user has the decision to make if they want to save and submit the request, so then it goes to the workflow, or the user can save it as draft or cancel or close. When we save and submit the request, user is notified that it's successful, and then now the receiving entity contact name, Sabine, will get a workflow to review this request and to confirm if she's fine with this. And that is the alignment piece we wanted to achieve with this tool. When the end user has finished the request, they are taken automatically to the portal view. So here the user can start a new request, or as you can see, there is a second blue button called Start Bulk Request. This is a blue button only visible to employees who are authorized to issue mass invoices. Also mentioned by Herman, if we want to issue in one request 100 or 200 invoices, we have this possibility with this bulk request. And there we mainly operate with filling out the request form by uploading Excel file. But let me take you through the workflow now. So I'm going to show you the next step of the workflow. Mrs. Sabine, she is now receiving an email and notification that there is a request waiting for her to be confirmed. So she can access it directly from the email, or she can see it in her task list on Picasso tool directly. And in this case, she has to enter Picasso form. She has to review the information, and she understands now her entity will be charged by this amount for the different line items. And she has also a decision to make: complete the review. She can forward the task to another person, or she can disagree with the form or with the request. She can maybe she spotted a mistake, or she's not in agreement with this cross-check. She can send it back to original requester, or she can close the form. Once she completes the review, it will go to the last workflow step, also commented by Herman. The accountant from intercompany team will review it for the last final check, whether it's compliant, whether everything is fine. And that's actually the last step here. Just also looking at the time. So this is our request. Now it's in task accountant review, and it's very similar to the previous step. The accountant can access this form, review it, has some additional functionalities here on the header part, can also access and even edit some of the line items if needed. And the very interesting part is that the accountant can already see the preview of the invoice and posting instructions. So we have PDF file, which will be the invoice, and we have one Excel file for accountant on issuing entity and one Excel file for accountant on receiving entity, which are containing posting instructions. Here the accountant can see the preview. Nevertheless, let me finalize it and we will see the final documents. We have also the history here, and the accountant can decide also on the scheduled finalization date, because at Merck we have a deadline for service charges. That's why Picasso is automatically scheduling this request for next month, for March. But for the purpose of my demonstration, I would like to tweak a little bit and finalize it for today. So the accountant can also forward the task, or can also not accept it and send it back. But in our demo, we will just finalize it. And now nothing can be changed anymore. Invoice is finalized and will be prepared for posting, which means depending on entities of Merck, we will have either manual posting process, or the bot from our RPA, robotic process automation, will take care of the posting. And now I will show you how the final invoice looks like. For that, I need to go to invoices in our portal, and we have different filter possibilities on this report. This is our final invoice. We can see it on our invoice report. We have already the automatic number generated here according to Picasso logic. It's a sequential numbering system. And when we double click on this invoice, we can see the documents. And I would like to show you the invoice. We have now standardized layout with all mandatory information according to VAT logic. We have information on the issuing entity, on who is the receiving entity, who will pay for the costs. We have the invoice number, tax ID, contact names. We have the two line items, and we have the amount markup displayed, VAT if applicable. Then we have a VAT wording coming from our tax table, and the footer with our payment terms. So everything is here really perfectly standardized, automated, and we got rid of all the manual invoice creation methods from the past. I also wanted to show you very quickly the posting file generated. For issuing entity, we have the following file with all information inserted here according to our complex rules. As you can see, that's not an easy posting file. The accountant will get it and will use it for posting manually, or in case this entity is in scope of our automation with RPA, it will be translated by the bot into upload file and will be uploaded into ERP system by the bot. So this is the structured posting file that Picasso generated based on all the rules. Okay, yeah, Herman, so I think that's anything else you would like to see from the demo, or I think
it's fine.
It's good. It's good enough, right? Okay.
Thanks a lot for this demo. I think it gives an impression of the different elements. And I think when we think about process digitization, it's a lot of people think about completely making it 100% automated. And our experience, it's actually more the interplay between the human side, making it as easy as possible for the humans, and the automation part. It's more like an exoskeleton. So you have the people with the robots where you have an extra skeleton around it that help you lift difficult tasks. And it's more this approach, which is in such processes like this one, in our view and experience, the way to approach it. I would quickly like to show one or two slides about, or not slides, but about the background. It's, I go to this element. We have here a button of administration, and one of the core elements is to make the administration part, so setting up all the rules, as much possible for the process owner as possible. So it's not, you don't have to program anything in order to make a new ERP system. So to put in a new ERP system, there's no touching the IT by IT. It's completely setting it up internally. And just to show you one or two examples, we have the category rules. So this is the way how the form Justina just showed works. So we had, for example, the IS, admin group information services, and we can select now the corresponding ERP system that we want to work with. For example, P16 Phoenix, it's one of the systems, and I can now set it up and say, okay, which categories do we have? The rules are applicable for several ERP systems, and then I say which fields are needed, which ones are mandatory fields, and just by putting something around here, now the form will, and when I save it, the form will behave differently. The same with the edit fields. We have here a whole set of different edit fields. For example, sometimes we need a manual text code for a certain situation because of special requirements. Again, I just put it here, and then the user can edit the text code for it. So all the settings are run through such interfaces. The same with text code, text rules. We have general setup things. We have the posting dates, etc. All this is self-service in terms of administration. And we have here as well some reporting possibilities right away, but also a connection to the KPI management system of Merck. So there's a daily export of KPI values to the central management system, so that a central dashboard can be applied. This is the end user thing. I would like to have a very, very short glimpse in how does it work technically. What does it mean low code? We have on the one side the designer for K2. And here we have a number of elements which we can work with and run it through. And we have on the one other side the dox42. And dox42 works like I have a Word template, for example, for the invoice. So this is the invoice element in here, where you have standard Word elements and then placeholders that come from the from external systems. We set up this integration, and here we have database as a data source, but you see there's a lot of different sources, web services, XML structures, whatever to connect in here. And like this, I can define where does this data come from. And here again, we have a certain interplay where we say we have a little bit of logic in the database, and we have then information on the form. And then I can pull in information here. I have data fields from my data sources, and I can just say, okay, the title should go into this place, and then I have the title field here or in some other area. We have repeating elements like these line items, so I can define here repeating information, for example, all the lines in my data source which have a certain key element, content type with it, and I can right away test it. So I can do the testing here and say this was, I think Justina's invoice was 6957, and we have exactly the invoice Justina just demonstrated for testing using these elements in here. Do you have, well, if you have any questions regarding this, please put it into the chat. We would conclude with just summarizing some benefits. Justina, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. We actually achieved most or all of the original goals which we set up before the project started. So when you recall, thinking about the pain points I mentioned at the beginning, we definitely harmonized the whole process. We made it easier for all end users, all potential Merck employees, even if they are not from finance and accounting. We gave them a tool or a request form where they can clearly see what is needed, what is mandatory. And we also made it easier for accounting in general, because we have all mandatory information from the start. We give them over to the accountants in a structured way, and we have definitely a good foundation for automation with the bots, regardless if we have one or many ERP systems to make the accounting. We also improved the correctness and timeliness of the whole accounting process, because now we have less delays of invoice exchange or posting. We have less discussions around invoices, less misunderstandings, and we definitely are more compliant to our tax and group guidelines. We have now clear business ownership. Every invoice needs to have clear assigned contact names so that it's we also make it more transparent if the charged services have an underlying intra-group agreement. And of course, we achieve, due to all what I mentioned, we achieve better transparency in reporting and reduced number of errors. So overall, also based on customer feedback or end user feedback, we have improved greatly the process, and we are very happy about it. Thank you very much. That's all from my side.
So
Right.
we have a few. Sorry.
Thank you. Wow. We haven't done the full webinar before, so it was really impressive to see. And I think it was really nice also from the end to end, like you mentioned, but still with the factor of where there's human interaction needed, to have it very simplified so that there's very little possibilities for error. So again, very impressive to just see what has been possible there. The one question that we received quite frequently is if the recording will be shared. So the simple answer is yes. We will reach out to you after with the recording, and probably also send the email addresses, at least from Hermann, me, and Cosima. Justina, I guess we'll keep this for the moment between the three of us. So then after, just if either you know who you want to talk to, reach out to us directly, or just the three of us, that's perfectly fine. Another question that we received is, if possible, could you name a percentage for the time and error saving compared to the manual process before?
Maybe I will try to answer. Thank you for this question. It was one of the biggest challenges to calculate the saving, and we saved actually time and effort across the organization in so many different departments that we really struggled to calculate the clear percentage. And I can say that so many units were affected, but on so many different stages of the process that it was just too complex to calculate. So I don't have the statistics. We, however, conducted several surveys and we collected feedback so that we knew exactly how it was perceived by the different teams. So the accounting team, the controllers, the local finance, even CFOs. So we have detailed feedback collected. We even launched an additional, after project, an additional optimization initiative where we still addressed different feedback. So we know the temperature of how the new process was helping, but we don't have the figures.
Okay. Oh, still sounds impressive to have time percentage across different units, which even if not calculated, sounds like if it increases the happiness rate, it's just an important factor that is kind of the not numbers factor of time saving and error probably as well. I think it's also usually quite a well effect of if you provide good information in terms of like the data provided. As you mentioned, for example, the names of if there's just the option to pull it up from the background. If that is correct in the system, I think it's also nice to, if you then again do, for example, like BI results, and based on the data will be correct. And that is a factor, I think, that is not even, it's hard to put in numbers, but I hope you agree, Hermann and Justina, it's just, the decisions management-wise you can then make if you have the correct data is just a different aspect we haven't even been able to discuss today, right?
I mean, we have all this statistics of this. So you otherwise you often launch some process mining project. We don't need to do that because we have all the data along it. We can evaluate it and so on. However, in this process, it's you do not measure really the time saving as such, because then you have again topics around work councils and similar things if you do it too correctly or too tightly in this. But I think, I mean, there's a lot of recognition of this project at Merck for really making a big impact on the whole topic of intercompany.
It also links to another question that we have is the cross-project usage. So this is something that was not only used right in one project, but it's basically the technical combination of K2 and dox42 and the implementation behind this is something you can use in different projects. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So we created a standard interface component to have to use dox42 directly from K2, for example, also in forms. So in other projects, the user clicks on a button on a form and directly gets a document in this moment. And overall, I would say Merck wouldn't be working anymore without the K2 platform. So we have a single server farm with by now some 100 projects in total on the platform in all areas of Merck. So it's finance, it's the different divisions, it's logistics, purchasing, R&D, whatever. It's really everywhere. And the big advantage is also in this project that there are no additional costs for the platform itself. So there's a central service provided, and that's it. And the other big thing is we now create, well, not now only, but even previously, we create a lot of synergies between the projects. So for example, we use other finance data in Picasso, which were somehow implemented in another project. We could reuse this. We were, again, elements from Picasso we reuse in another project where it's about cost object management, so setting up new cost centers and similar things. And there's so much synergies by having not only a single project, but really having this vision of a platform which you can reuse across different projects and do it again and again.
And I think with what you've shown, you proved that the Lego analogy is something that is kind of the modern way to do IT, right? To not like have that one monolithic system that does everything, but to pick the right Lego bricks, put them together. Sometimes it's Duplo, sometimes it's Lego Technic, as you've seen. All right, looking at the time, I think that's mostly it. If there's any more questions, feel free to reach out to everybody. Lastly, Hermann, Justina, and Cosimo, thank you a lot, especially Hermann and Justina, for taking the time to prepare all of this, to put in the time to demo this to us, and to show something that was so far internally well known, also into the world. Yeah, Cosimo, as I said, thank you also to you. It's been great that you have been on this call as well today. And lastly, to all the attendees, I hope you had a good time. Enjoy your day. There is still time for another coffee before the lunch break, if you're in Europe at least. There is, I think, nothing else to add for the moment. Thanks, everybody. I hope you had a great time. I did. And we will reach out to you with the recordings. That's it from us today. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.